If you're a pop culture junkie who loves TV, film, music, comedy, and other really important stuff, then you've come to the right place. Get ready and settle in for Classic Conversations, the best pop culture interviews in the world. That's right, we circled the globe so you don't have to. If you're ready to be the king of the water cooler, then you're ready for Classic Conversations with your host, Jeff Dwoskin.
All right, Nicole, thank you so much for that amazing introduction. You get the show going each and every week, and this week was no exception. Welcome, everybody, to episode 278 of Classic Conversations. As always, I am your host, Jeff Dwoskin. Great to have you back for what's sure to be a classic conversation for the ages. TV director, cinematographer Brenton Spencer is here to share stories of behind the camera and in front of the camera magic, The Flash, SCTV, the Coreys. This episode has it all, and that's coming up in just a few seconds. And in these few seconds, the legendary Eric Roberts joined us last week. So many great stories. Do not miss that conversation. But first, do not miss my conversation with Brenton Spencer. We're talking a lot about the CW's The Flash, where he spent a lot of time going back and forth in history, 21 Jump Street, SCTV, so many great stories. Oh, First Blood, so many great stories coming up right now. All right, everyone, I'm excited to introduce you to my next guest. Award-winning television director and cinematographer, a resume which boasts The Flash, Stargate Atlantis, 21 Jump Street. Welcome to the show, Brenton Spencer.
Well, thank you for that intro, Jeff. I feel like I should be in the chorus line of the Warner Brothers Saturday morning cartoon lineup where I'm marching along with "This Is It, the Night of Nice." Great intro, so I appreciate that.
Oh, hey, well, I'm excited to have you. Such a huge career and resume. I know you're from Canada, so it wasn't a huge surprise that your early work was with SCTV. I guess I was most surprised to see that they had a cinematographer, only because I didn't even know they had a budget.
SCTV was a highlight of my career and anyone associated with it. There was so much brilliance in SCTV. And I was one of a number of DPs, but I shot the film unit. Everything else was on tape or video. And the film unit included the scary previews, Dr. Tongue's scary previews, and the Libby Wolfson documentary TV series. I shot some classics like Cujo 2, Officer and a Gentile, which is just a classic with Andrea Martin and Martin Short. I didn't really watch SCTV before I started. I'd worked with the director John Blanchard on a feature film. And John was the brains behind the 10 seasons of SCTV. He was able to pull all those amazing talents, John Candy, Joe Flaherty, etc. And he was able to pull all of them together. And we met on a movie. I was a camera operator. He was the DP, and he asked me if I wanted to shoot SCTV. And I was familiar with it as this iconic show, but I had never really watched it. I was assigned to go out and shoot these Libby Wolfson documentaries with Andrea Martin, and I thought it was the real deal. I thought this is a serious, and this is 20 years before the internet, so I wasn't able to dial up and get the background. So I was out there fully expecting that this was a legitimate documentary.
That's amazing.
That was only the beginning of my many surprises.
I mean, that cast was insane. I mean, with Eugene Levy, Andrea Martin, Martin Short. Which seasons were you in specifically? What notable?
Season 10.
Okay.
Season 10, when they moved back to Toronto.
So many of them today are still so prominent. Catherine O'Hara, Andrea Martin, Martin Short, Eugene Levy. I mean, just like...
Well, look at the success of Schitt's Creek. I mean, that's SCTV Redux.
Oh, yeah. That's Next Generation right there.
And then any Christopher Guest movie has the SCTV ensemble cast, whether it's Best in Show was a classic, and Waiting for Guffman that featured the cast so strongly, the SCTV cast.
Yeah, Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara in all those movies, just incredible. Those are some of my favorite movies. Best in Show is probably, I could watch that over and over and over again. Oh my goodness.
I was talking to someone the other day and I said, knee-jerk reaction, Best in Show was my favorite. And then for 1 second, as the synapses fired, hey, what about Waiting for Guffman? I still love Spinal Tap. And I had my own Spinal Tap moment. And was it prior to me watching Spinal Tap? No, it was after Spinal Tap. But it was a classic Stonehenge moment where I was hired to shoot the second unit or the additional photography. A movie had been shot. Steve Foley actually starred in it. It was called High Stakes. Peter Simpson, who produced the Prom Night movies, was the producer of it. And Ray Sager was another producer, and Ray played the Wizard of Gore in the Herschel Gordon Lewis classic. So this was, just behind the camera. It was a star cast. But anyway, my Stonehenge moment was we had to blow up Hitler's cave where all these kind of artifacts that the heroes had been searching for. And the cave, the real cave that was shot in the film featured, ceiling probably 15 feet high, and it was 30, 40 feet across, et cetera. And we had to blow this up. So a miniature was built. And I said, to be successful in the miniature, the scale, we have to keep the scale as high as we can. Obviously, 1-to-1 would have 15-foot ceilings. But I said, if you can bring it down to like 30% or something like that, if I could get, 9 foot, and we can't afford that. Okay, 6 feet. Can you give me? Yeah. Okay. And we'll shoot it at high speed. We'll slow everything down. We'll put a lot of miniature rocks and things like that. I said to the model builder, so how high is it? And he said, well, and he was standing up and he featured a height about that, and it's about 6 feet. And I said, okay, this will work well, but I want to see it. So we go to the studio, it's in a residential part of Toronto. I thought, okay, well, maybe it's in a refurbished garage or something like that. And then we start walking out the back stairs of a tenement that are, fairly wide enough for your shoulders. And I thought, okay, well, maybe he built it in modules, and then it will be assembled somewhere later. And then we get in, we walk down a narrow hallway in this artist loft, and we walk into this tiny little apartment. But he was right. It was about that tall, but it was sitting on a desk that was about 4 feet high. So we had this.
I think
that's my Stonehenge moment.
I think there's a whole generation of people that learn the difference between feet and inches because of that Stonehenge scene in Spinal Tap.
No, absolutely. And the dangers of getting through airport security, with cucumbers and tinfoil. And I think every filmmaker has had. I wonder what Spielberg's was on Jaws. It was probably when he first realized that the shark did not work at all.
Which turned out to be the biggest blessing for that film, because his workarounds for that turned it into a classic. I guess when you're handed lemons. I had Ed Begley Jr. on the show, and I introduced him when my opening introduction was I introduced him as the drummer from Spinal Tap.
One of the drummers, yeah.
Yeah. I think he was the first one to die or something. Any other funny SCTV stories? I got to spend some time with Dave Thomas once and chat his ear off. Any particular? It sounds like you got to work a lot with Andrea Martin, who's just wonderful.
Yeah, Andrea and Martin Short, Eugene Levy, really everyone. It was an ensemble cast, and they all moved through. But we were shooting a scene once, and the eyepiece. And no, we didn't have a lot of money. It was a 1-to-1 ratio. It had to be. So usually a feature film sometimes has, 20, depending who the director is, 20-to-1 ratio. So, as you shoot 20 minutes, but only 1 minute's going to end up. But we had pretty close to 1-to-1 ratio. And the eyepiece totally falls off the camera. And I had been, operating. I was the DP and the operator, and I had been, following everybody. Fairly loose lens, fairly, wide lens, but not super wide. I had to follow people. The eyepiece falls off. The actors, and I think it was Joe Flaherty, reacted to the eyepiece coming on, and he stays in character, and he makes this comment about how are we ever going to, get this movie made. We were doing a scene within a movie. He said the eyepiece is coming off of the camera, so. Sometimes we would just run out of daylight, and I remember getting all the vehicles together, turning on the headlights. It's a bit of a mythical approach, but we actually did that on at least one occasion on SCTV just to get enough light in there. But just the kismet and the craziness and the respect and the love, these are amazing actors, and everyone knew that this was gold, that this was iconic, legendary work we were doing. And Jewel Hollamar was the costume designer. He was also the lead of the Jewel Hollmeyer dancers, you would see them in the background. And Mike McMurray was one of the lighting technicians on the show, and he gaffed my second unit. He's a great DP, DP'd Earth Final Conflict before I came on. But Mike had this crazy little jig that he would do, and Martin Short, sort of copied it as that Ed Grimley kind of move. Paid tribute to Mike, of course. Yeah, just wonderful comic opportunities, and the environment that we were in allowed for so much creativity. It was all special.
Amazing. That was one of your first like big resume stuffers.
Yes, I had worked as an assistant and an operator on the second unit of First Blood prior to that. As a DP credit, yeah, that was my first big standalone credit.
Wait, First Blood as in Rambo First Blood?
Yes, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, we shot that in 1980.
Now that's a movie.
Oh, yeah. And I had to laugh over the years. I've been working on different series, and I would read a writer's description. It was said, Rambo style, or Rambo in this scene in the tunnels, as if Rambo on the cliff face. And I was there for all of those moments. And yeah, I think, I would tell the writers, yeah, I think I know exactly what you need.
You're like, I got this.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. I'm dying to ask, blown away working with the Coreys, Haim and Feldman. When I grew up, they were just like everywhere. I just wanted to shout them out. That was one of your directorials, and Nicole Eggert. That was that's like key late 80s, early 90s stardom right there. You had them all in one.
Yeah, that was again Peter Simpson and Ray Sager from the Prom Night series. They produced for my rookie appearance as a director. It was quite the ride. But I found these are three really wonderful actors, and it's a tough road on Hollywood, especially when you're brought into it as a child. I don't see how anyone can expect that a child performer can transition wholly. And in terms of mental health, well, maybe it's a lack of, or a struggle with, or whatever, but is it a requirement to be in show business? Certainly we can use those issues, and those struggles and those obstacles to create. But I worked with those three actors really early on. They're so great, so talented. And yet, it was impossible for them, I think, to continue on and carry throughout the rest of the career the kind of talent that they have. I love them dearly. They were a handful. Wow.
That would have been when they were young and hot. They kind of owned the world a little bit at that moment. So I can imagine it would have been, because that was like they're hated. But you're right about kid actors. I mean, for every Neil Patrick Harris or Jodie Foster, there's a million other stories that didn't end that well, or it's rough. And it's like, I was talking to Christopher Knight, Peter Brady, and I was like, if you had kids, would you have let them act? And he was like, no, never. I think kid actors feel that way about kids, like trying to, especially from that time frame. It might be better now, I'm not sure. But even like that Brooke Shields documentary where she's reflecting on everything, and it's just, a lot of it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. I'm not going to suggest that anyone lost a childhood, but those childhood moments are so precious. They're distilled. A minute in childhood time is, an eternity. And as you age, you don't even think about the minutes anymore. But as a child, you delve in, you explore, you take apart, you dismantle every moment because it's been presented to you new the first time. And that's what Corey and Nicole did extremely well, and subtly too. But they're getting fired out of a circus can in Hollywood, and how much of a lot of it's luck, kismet, I guess. I don't know.
Brenton, how did you get started? When did you know cinematography, directing was going to be your thing? What inspired you early on that led you on this path?
I mean, I love questions about the origin of, what we do. For me, the origin was just when I was a kid, I don't know, less than 10 anyway. My uncle was going to university and sent me a bunch of English literature books from first year he was there. They would kick around, and I'd open them, and there'd be something like a quote of Shakespeare or something underlined, and I knew that this is important. And so very early on, a good friend of mine and I, we would write. We wanted, to write a novel about whaling. Neither one of us had even heard about Moby Dick at that time, but so we were always interested in creating. And I was taking a creative writing course at university, and the instructor said, "And you want, I've got some film and a camera, a movie camera. You can make a film if you like, and there's some money for developing. Anyone interested in it?" Shot my hand. I was the only one. And I shot this little pixelated thing where I'm moving clay pieces around, time lapse. Every two frame you move it. Every two frame you move it. You send it away in the mail. It comes back from Kodak, but you got to go somewhere to pick it up. And I remember I couldn't wait. I'm in there. It was at a drugstore. I'm in the line, and I get it. And I couldn't wait. I opened it was Super 8, and I started pulling it quickly through I didn't even thread it up, motion picture, a projected for. But just the idea, all of a sudden they're in motion. It captivated me. It had me immediately. And some people say when we watch a film, there's a certain amount of hypnotism played out. Well, it was magic and abracadabra. And I was hypnotized totally at how these things moved in a different plane than me standing there. I've got this film, and there's a separate world going on there. So I was hypnotized. I could smell it too. In those days, have you ever shot film? Super 8 or anything?
Not like that, no.
It's even Super 8, there's a smell that comes out of that box, that Kodak. I don't know what Fuji smelled like. I shot a lot of Fuji. But anyhow, just the smell and the aroma of the chemicals of the celluloid base. So there's an olfactory thing going on there too. There's a visual thing. So there's a tactile thing.
No, I totally understand. I mean, I'm not that specific, but I mean, I am from the 35 millimeter camera world where, you used to have to take pictures and then drop them off, and days later they would be ready for you. And then 1 hour photo was quite an invention at one point. It's funny when you think back on that stuff.
Oh, yeah. And even people would stand around the early 1 hours and look at anonymous photographs of somebody else that were printed and would, remember? They would just spit out.
Yeah, I remember learning early on, don't take pictures of things you don't want other people to see.
Yeah. No, we should all remember that and more. Do you remember also when there was a little brownie camera, a small camera that was the house camera? And if people come to a birthday party or Christmas, they'd say, "Will you please send me a copy when they come back?" In other words, when you pack it, when you shoot everything on the roll and you send it away and it comes back in the mail. And there'd be a whole year. There'd be 12 or maybe the most, 36 exposures? And there would be a whole year on there. And now we take pictures almost incidentally of what's going on, like, and do we ever really look at them again? I mean, we post them and that it's gone. That nostalgia of looking at an image.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at my photos on 57,000 photos, which is an insane number. I mean, that's forever, right? But you're right. It used to be you meticulously would take photos. And then sometimes when you took that film in, you didn't even really fully know everything that was going to be on it. And then, of course, you had to make that decision. Brenton, would you like single prints or double prints?
Yeah.
And then it comes back. Yeah. Now you look at it, you don't like it. Someone's blinking, you redo it. Yeah. It's a whole new world.
Well, it's the same when we shot in film. Now you can roll on and on and on, and directors do, and there's some efficiencies in it. You could only roll around 11 minutes or so in 35 millimeter. That was the 1,000-foot mag. And it cost, what didn't originally. Originally, people just say, keep rolling. Film's cheap, until it didn't become cheap anymore. And then the producers be clutching your pearls as they hear the high-speed camera like roar up to 120 or more, depending on what you're shooting, right? And now we shot one series on the Flash, one episode on the Flash. Armin Kevorkian, a great visual effects supervisor, his visual effects supervisor in the first 7 seasons of the Flash. He directed an entire episode of the Flash at 120 frames. And that's quite an accomplishment, everyone. Just the data alone.
That's incredible. How did you become part of the Flash? I mean, just going by IMDb, which sometimes can be wrong, but you've been a part of at least a third of all the episodes as a cinematographer, over 50 or so, and then directed Rogues of War in the last season. I wanted to ask you about that creme brulee, if you had the, it looked delish, if you had the recipe that they're making in the beginning, you know.
Yeah.
So how did you land the Flash gig?
Well, I had worked with J.P. Finn in the past. Kim Miles was moving on. He shot a feature film, actually. And so there was an opening. I'd worked with JP before, and how would you like to do the Flash?
Were you a fan of the Flash, either like the show or like just the character itself or superhero genre?
When I was a kid, there were two groups, DC and Marvel. I was a DC guy just because the first box of comics I got, my mom went to a sale at someone's house, and this would be, I don't know, 1960 or something. And the woman said, "Oh, my sons have gone to college. Would you like their comics?" Remember, this is 1960. Boxes. And one of the kids was a fan of Batman. And I don't know where they are now. Maybe in the Smithsonian, who knows? But I was intrigued by Batman. And the rest of the superheroes that inhabited my neighborhood were Marvel. And this is my first DC superhero was Batman. And these guys are like real. These are sweat and blood superhero. I know technically Batman's not a superhero, but these were visceral characters. These were characters that were more like me than Marvel. Two different worlds, two different camps. I like the edginess of the DC world, like Batman in particular. Barry Allen was always cool because he's the fastest guy, but I was a Batman guy.
Sorry to interrupt. I have to take a quick break. In the meantime, ponder whether you're a DC or Marvel person. I'm mostly Marvel. I grew up Marvel, Spider-Man kind of guy, but I can appreciate a good DC. Let me know what you are. Tweet at me, comment, whatever. But in the meantime, thank you for your support of the sponsors. When you support the sponsors, you're supporting us here at Classic Conversations, and that's how we keep the lights on. And now back to my conversation with Brenton Spencer. Did you watch The Flash with John Wesley Shipp back in late 80s?
No, I didn't. In what years did that run? Was that 88? No, was that 86 to 80?
I know it came out around the same time as Batman 89, Michael Keaton's Batman. So it had to have been like late 80s.
No, I didn't. But I was Batman, huge fan of the OG Batman, the original. I mean, that was one of the visual shifts in my thinking. So when did Batman come out? I'm going to say 64, 65. And all of a sudden there is this, I'm introduced to this world. Like up till then, I was straight up, World War II movies, cowboy movies, John Wayne, very beginnings of Clint Eastwood and sort of an alternative version of Hollywood. And then Batman and this new sort of thing. It was campy, and the costumes. And I wasn't introduced to the kind of humor and the kind of setup of that. It led to an introduction to me visually, for some reason, to Lichtenstein and Andy Warhol. It gave me this huge appreciation. I felt like it allowed me to transition from black and white in my thinking into color. And then after that, Bridge of the River Kwai. That was released a year. No, it was released right around the same time. Yeah, which was the saturation of color. Lawrence of Arabia.
All right, so you take over CW's The Flash, cinematographer. Were you able to put your stamp on it? Like, what was what were you able to kind of bring to the table? Or did you need to kind of stay, did they build this world and you kind of had to learn it and kind of stay in that?
So I showed up on The Flash season 4, episode 401, directed by Glenn Winter. Glenn had DP'd the Arrow and he DP'd the pilot of The Flash as well and had transitioned into directing. But Glenn and I went way back. As a matter of fact, when he was in university, I was sort of a visiting, we'll call it lecturer, and I'd come and talk to everyone about cinematography and became friends with Glenn while he was still a student. And when he graduated, I brought him onto a TV series or a pilot I was shooting for Stephen Cannell called The Hat Squad. It's turned into a TV series. But so Glenn and I had a very interesting relationship. He just showed me my way around The Flash and encouraged me to be really bold and try stuff. And one of the things to do that was to get Glenn introduced me to this 10 millimeter Zeiss lens. And normally the super wide angle lenses will distort things. This lens really reduces the distortion. So you can put it in places in rooms and capture this dimension that you don't really get. So I think bringing in the 10 mil and leaning into the 10 mil lens, we transitioned from tungsten lights and HMIs to probably 90% digital, and all of our cues, all of our color temperature, all of our intensity was all run through a computer, through a program. All the lights were programmed. We could change the lights and the color on the fly. And I think we were the leading edge in that kind of technology. The gaffer is Jesse Key, who was really leading that wave of digital lighting. I think it's the influence of the digital lights, knowing not to be afraid of the 10 mil. And when when the producers saw the success, Eric Wallace was a showrunner in season 5 onwards. He came up and directed one and wanted to go wide, and I introduced him to the 10, and it was a 10 millimeter for the next 4 seasons. And working together with the art director to get a lot of reflective. Jenny Wilson is a production designer, and I wanted to bring as much reflective material onto the sets too. And we had these huge sheets of acrylic that we would lay along floors at a speed lab. You can see in really strongly in season 8 and 9, but throughout seasons 4, 5, 6, all the way. There was a wonderful show that I shot called Entering Flash Time. Greg Jackson was the director. We built a set out of just acrylic walls, and probably one of my favorite episodes in the years of the Flash. Entering Flash Time, really strong episode. Really, really got heavy into high speed in my time there. I think it was the wide angle lenses, working with the art department and special effects to get wet downs everywhere. Sometimes interior, sometimes we will wet down areas of the speed lab. And you have to be cautious when you wet down a set, because if it's not built for it, and usually they're not, they'll slowly fall apart. So you don't make a lot of friends in production when you do that. And so we started building sets that were waterproof. And atmosphere, steam and smoke, and having characters, especially superheroes, at high speed, moving and appearing through atmosphere and fog. Just the silhouettes of them. One great example is when Red Lightning was introduced in 803. At the very end, it's almost the penultimate beat when you see her coming through the fog and the mist. And originally, that was a visual effect. We're going to spend a lot of bucks to create that. And we could do it practically, which was a super bonus. So to create an image, the people that I relied on were special effects. And of course, the camera department, but the art department as well. The non-camera grip and electric crew were so important. And working with props too. I loved working with a lot of forced perspective, and they would build me oversized, cue balls, this big that I could put GoPros on, or I could put a GoPro on a cue and hit an oversized cue ball. So I was always working with forced perspective and oversized pockets for the balls to fall in, oversized chess pieces. So the one in the foreground might be this size, and the pawn in the background would be a foot high. Love that. Kayla Compton directed 9/11, and we created these forced perspective bullets because the camera just can't get everywhere. So you build things oversized. And I think I brought an analog feel to my work on The Flash. I love camera trickery, really smoke and mirrors, honestly. Shot into a lot of mirrors in my time, my episodes of The Flash. And I love it. And that goes right back to the very beginnings of movie making, where it came from sort of vaudeville and stage, the technology. So they were doing magicians sawing people in half kind of gags and that was all brought into TV. And I love that, 120 years later, we are still using smoke and mirrors. We can't forget that too. We've gone so digital. I'll fix it post, put that flare in post. We're going to lose a lot if we forget where we came from. We're going to lose a lot of texture.
There's something about practical that just kind of gives it more of a warmth. And I think in some cases, maybe challenges the people making it to come up with something different. And like we talked about how Spielberg kind of shifted in Jaws, and that became something amazing. Like to me, like the original Star Wars movies were great because it was so practical. When it got too animated and too special effecty, it sort of lost, I think, some of the human aspect of it and the charm of it. I love hearing the focus on practical, because you can tell the difference. It feels real, or you connect with it differently, I think.
The big change for me we have to welcome change. And change, if it's good, well, it takes us with it. If it's bad, then it creates the need for good, that sort of dialectic continuum. We have to accept change, which is, for me, it was watching the movie Troy, with Brad Pitt. And there was a shot, and Brad Pitt in all his glory on a balcony, the camera started sort of in a meeting close-up, and he just looks awesome. He could be here right now, and he'd look great. Anyway, the camera pulls back. 1,000, 2,000, and then it starts revealing the city of Troy 2,500 years ago, all the way back over the countryside. And I realized, my God, the only part of that wasn't an animation was maybe the count of 1,000, 2,000 as we're pulling back, and then it's all digital. And it became this shift for me that movies are never real, but for all those things that you just said about the human quality that we get in analog by doing things physically, I thought that it had shifted and we were going away from that. And so I think we have to remember what you said. We can't forget those, and we have to just remember the humanity that allows us. And the humanity does translate onto what we do. Film is an art form. Do we do art every day? Well, we strive to, but when we're artful, most of the time I know I am. And then sometimes we're artists. And I know those moments when I've lit close up and the actors responding to the moment, and I know that that's as good as it gets. And every once in a while we have a chance to light a scene, shoot a scene that we know is in the world of art, not of the beige drudgery of every day of, pulling that
Right.
of that load. It is what we do is art, and our art reflects the humanity, not of the people that view it, but also of the creator. So when we get away from that human aspect, it will affect us. It will change things.
How cool is it to direct an episode in the final season? Kind of take the helm.
I was so fortunate to direct the episode that I got on The Flash. You're always struggling to put the camera in a different place to approach sets many years later. But really, that's just a state of mind, because you can always find something new, something different, something to change the story in a little perspective. But I was struggling with my episode because I couldn't get the hook on it. I couldn't get the feel for what it was. And I forget what I was watching on, oh my God, yeah, it was a John Wayne movie. It was his last movie. It was called The Shootist. And he was very sick at the time. And I didn't even watch. I just scanned it in the listings. And I realized that's what my episode is. My episode was a Western. And I could approach it like Sergio Leone. And it was the good, the bad, and the ugly. It was the gang that couldn't shoot too straight. It was the gang that couldn't shoot straight. It was Seven Samurai. And I had to get this group together. And I told them, I'm going to shoot like Sergio Leone, 18 millimeter and a 300 millimeter. And everything will be wide or be on all the detail of the eyes. And I said, think of your superhero powers like a gunslinger. And if you're talking to John Core, if your ice and your power is coming out of your fists, treat that as if it's a gun, it's a pistol. And, in a Western, they'll show a cowboy move back their jacket to kind of reveal the gun, and then there might be another insert of their hand maybe on the gun, clicking. And I said, all that detail would do that, but we'll do it with your powers as if they're guns. And there's a beautiful sequence in it. I think it's in the beginning of the second act. It's around scene 15 or something like that, when everyone gets together and then they get into their positions like it's going to be a shootout, and they decide, now let's work as a team. I did something that I learned from a director I worked with years ago, and I shot the close-up coverage first for the master shot. That works for lots of reasons. I would recommend any director to not be afraid of it, but it solves a lot of continuity issues. But there's nothing like showing up at call at 8 o'clock in the morning and having a 24 millimeter lens just stuck right in your face. Like, this is go time, baby. I like shooting wide lenses in close because I love I don't want to ignore the fact that what I do is a mechanical process. Making movies, directing, being an actor. It's mechanical. There's a machine, camera. I like the sense of feeling that. I like the presence of a camera, not physically moving around unless it advances the story, but just for everyone to feel, for the actors to feel the presence, for the camera operators there, he's feeling the actors. And a wide lens in close gives a lot of feeling of background too. Yeah, I loved it. It was great. And the kicker was I had a great editor. So, beautiful story.
How was it? Because you were part of the CW Flash family for quite some time. So it was a kind of an emotional ending. Just ending, right? Just after being together for so long. Where were you there? 5 seasons.
4 or 5, 6, 7. And I was in there season 3 as well, doing second units.
You were over there almost practically the whole time. So what was it like on the set as everything was kind of closing up and people were saying goodbye? Pretty emotional?
Yeah, unbelievably so, in a way that caught everyone by surprise, except for Eric Wallace. He had a speech at the beginning of the season. He said, this is how it's going to play out. It's the last season and emotions are going to ride high in ways that you're not going to know. You're going to be doing something or feeling something or frustrated by something or angry with something or happy with something. But underpinning all of it, he said, was the fact that we're saying goodbye. And this is a family and an emotional and intellectual investment. And it's going to hurt. It's going to be bittersweet. And it was all of those things that Eric said it was. And then the coolest rap party ever. It wasn't, Wild West barroom brawl by any means, but just a really nice opportunity for everyone to thank each other. Yeah, it was one of a kind experience.
Sounds amazing. 21 Jump Street, time traveling for a bit. Another one of your earlier ones. It's kind of like the classic show. It's such a... Were those the Johnny Depp years or no?
Well, some of them were. I was the main unit DP on season 5. Johnny had left in season 3.5, 4, and I'd worked on the second units in 3 and 4. Stephen Cannell produced 21 Jump Street. J.P. Finn, the producer of The Flash, was the PM, the production manager of 21 Jump Street.
Oh, everything connects.
Whole family of people that worked on Jump Street and Wise Guy. Johnny Depp knew before anyone did really that, his star quality, his potential, and knew that he had to get out of there, I think, as quickly as possible. And the company acknowledged that as well. Super talented guy, very, I was working on the second units, wouldn't see him a lot, but a friend of mine had a restaurant that he would go to often at RAP. So I would see him, more there. And he was just a regular guy. He was a good guy.
Very talented, very talented. Yeah. As we kind of wrap up, you've got a million things on your resume that are awesome. What is one of the favorites that we haven't discussed yet that you might want to share a story from? Or I could cherry pick one.
Well, boy, I'm thinking about SCTV and, the two Corys. Corey Haim, Corey Feldman. We talked about First Blood.
What about Stargate Atlantis?
Stargate Atlantis, Earth Final Conflict with Gene, Roddenberry. And Rod Roddenberry and I became, good buddies. Very cool film experience I had was the making of Crow's Nest, which was an indie picture. And my writing partner, now I don't write. It's the hardest thing to do. But my writing partner and development partner, John Shepard, has written everything we've done, Never Cry Werewolf and Crow's Nest. Crow's Nest, as one critic said, is the best movie you've never seen. It was just this adrenaline-soaked indie effort to create a very, very cool little movie. And we had the tiniest, the microest of crews, and we got it. We got it distributed. We got it up on Netflix. And so I think, and Crow's Nest was handmade. John's wife made some of the costumes, and I directed and shot it and walked around with a jug of special effects blood to pour on everything constantly.
That's awesome.
So Crow's Nest put it all together. It was a visceral experience.
Very cool. Well, Brenton, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I really appreciate this. Well, other than BrentonSpencerFilms.com, where do you hang out online, or do you?
I'm on Instagram, Brenton Spencer Films, my website, Brenton Spencer Films, and I'm very proud of the demo reel of The Flash, of my work on The Flash that I'm putting up there. In like 6 years and in 30 seconds.
Which makes sense because it's the Flash. So it should be a lot in a short amount of time. So it makes
Vanity
sense.
required a 1-minute version, but all the fans, all the Flash, and that will be up any day. But I really encourage everyone to come and take a look, and you'll see the acrylic, the smoke, and the mirrors that I think made the Flash.
That's awesome. I'll put links in the show notes so everyone can get to it really easily. Thank you so much. This was amazing. I really appreciate you hanging out with me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeff. I mean, wow, you're so easy to talk to, and you do the most important thing, you listen. I'm just watching you listening. It's so cool, and I'm on this ride. I know I can see how you're reacting and digging when it went. So thank you so much. Real pleasure.
All right. How amazing was Brenton Spencer? So many great stories. That interview kind of went by in a flash, didn't it? Get it? Bum, bum, bum. All right. I waited the whole episode to say that. Well, can't believe it is over. Huge thank you to Brenton Spencer for hanging out with me. And of course, huge thank you to all of you for coming back week after week. It means the world to me, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Classic Conversations. If you like what you heard, don't be shy and give us a follow on your favorite podcast app. Also, why not go ahead and tell all your friends about the show? You strike us as the kind of person that people listen to. Thanks in advance for spreading the word, and we'll catch you next time on Classic Conversations.